Hi, I'm Glen Mowrer, and I want to welcome you to the Next Step show. Today's show is available, as always, on cable channel 17 in Santa Barbara, and also it's streamed on Ustream or on YouTube, and which you can find by googling either Ustream or YouTube, The Next Step TV SB, and find this episode and any other episode that we've done in the last several months for viewing and sharing. Our subject today is going to be fracking Santa Barbara, and our guest is Jim Taylor, who is a advisory board member of the Santa Barbara Water Guardians. Hopefully, occasionally on the course of the afternoon, we'll have their website up, the Santa Barbara Water Guardians, and that will allow you to contact them and get more information about the activity of this group. But meanwhile, we're going to discuss what they've done and how we caught what they're trying to do to deal with the threat of fracking in our own community. Jim, welcome. Thank you for coming here, and thank your group for being so effective in getting this initiative on the ballot, hopefully in the coming general election in November.
Yeah.
The initiative would ban fracking along with other forms of extracting hydrocarbons and gases from the soil, acidizing, and steam injection, I think. We'll talk about those briefly, but mainly I think I'm concerned, and I think the general public is more concerned with what we would normally traditionally call fracking, as I understand it. So why don't we talk about that and the two other alternatives that are included in the ballot, and then go into a little bit more about what fracking is and what it does.
Sure. Well, we specifically include hydraulic fracturing, which is where the term fracking comes from, as well as acidization or acid stimulation, and cyclic steam injection in the initiative, because those three techniques are all used. They're sometimes used in combination or in sequence. And in this part of the world, our geology is such that the traditional fracking, like they do in the Midwest, for example, doesn't really work very well here, because our shale is convoluted from seismic activity. So you'd have more of a layer cake situation in the Midwest. What all of these techniques do is inject something into the ground. In the case of steam injection, it's superheated water, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it forces the oil, it melts it, and then gets sucked up at an adjacent well. In the acid matrix or acid stimulation, they actually pour hydrofluoric acid, which is like a chemical, one of the most dangerous industrial chemicals there is. It's classified as a chemical weapon. The United States Steelworkers is trying to ban it from all industrial processes. It forms a ground-hugging cloud of fatal vapor if it escapes. So this is the acid matrix. They also use acid in cleaning the equipment and so on, and we're not talking about that. We're specifically exempting that kind of use of the acid, only addressing the acid in a fracking kind of operation. The standard fracking of injecting water, sand, and a cocktail of chemicals is where the term fracking comes from. And that's also used, it's been used in adjacent areas, it's been used in the county up in the North County, in San Ynez, and it's been used in the Channel. And it's been, like down in Ventura County, and it has definitely potential for being used in this area. We want to get out in front of all of this activity,
I think people need to remember or recognize, and maybe they don't, that Santa Barbara County, and we tend not to think about this, but Santa Barbara County is the 5th or 6th largest oil production or hydrocarbon production county in the state of California.
Well, and it's the site of the 1969 oil spill, which gave birth to the whole
environmental movement, we're proud to say. So this is a serious issue here. I mean, there's a lot of oil being produced, and a lot of natural gas potentially being produced in this county, and these wells that have been there for decades, 100 years or so, in some cases, I think, are starting to become less productive.
Well, yeah, we've taken out all the easy oil. The days of sticking a straw in the ground and a gusher comes out, those are long gone. What we have now is thick, heavy crude that remains, or it's bound up in sand or shale or diatomaceous earth, like up in the Santa Maria area. And that requires these extreme technologies to get it out. And what all these extreme technologies have in common is chemicals, byproducts, atmospheric contamination, water contamination, spills, all that kind of stuff. This is different than the oil extraction techniques that have been used for 100 years here in the county. And we're only talking about future projects. We're not talking about stopping anything that's already underway. We're not addressing conventional oil operations whatsoever. We're talking about these 3 specific techniques in future projects.
Which have proven not just controversial, but perhaps extremely dangerous and problematic around the world.
Yeah, well,
in various jurisdictions.
We've had a boom, basically, of fracking. The technology itself was invented in the late 40s, I believe, but the most of its use has been in very recent times.
Well, let's start with, I might just start with some of the simple questions. You mentioned the chemicals, and I want to get into that. But let's just start with the simplest thing. California is in a major drought.
Right.
And we have been in major droughts most of my life, off and on.
It's basically a desert.
I grew up, born in California, and lived all my life in California. And there's times when we have extra water, but there's never a time when we're permanently assured of a good water supply,
Right.
and the population grows and all that. Fracking it uses an immense amount of water. I read a statistic that said that they would use as much as, what was it, a billion gallons of water, 3 to 5 million gallons of fresh water per well.
Yes, that's right.
3 to 5 million gallons of water per well.
Imagine 20 tanker trucks.
Okay, and is that,
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah, and then 300,000 pounds of sand, up to 1 million pounds of sand.
Well,
I mean, and then chemicals, 30 different chemicals.
But
They're all going down
if
into
you've
this.
got, let's say, 50 or 100 wells in Santa Barbara County that they want to frack,
Yeah, where's the water going to come
where's
from?
this water coming from? Now, they say, well, they recover it, but they also admit they lose at least 20% of the water
Right.
is lost either in the process or in the ground, left in the ground.
Right.
So there's a huge amount of water, and the only way they can get that water is to take it out of the aquifer, as far as I can tell, or from some of the California Water Project water that they might have access to.
Right.
So the rest of us can't have a cup of water or a glass of water in a restaurant, or we're afraid to wash our car.
Yeah.
They're going to have millions of gallons of water to try to produce more hydrocarbons out of the ground.
Well, we call ourselves the water guardians for good reason. One is to protect the supply so that we have ample water for agriculture and domestic and municipal uses, but also protecting the water that is in the ground from being poisoned by a chemical spill or an oil spill. Once you have an aquifer contaminated with hydrofluoric acid or toluene or benzene or anything, it's pretty hard to get that stuff out of it. So once the damage is done, it's done.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So in the form of fracturing that led to the term fracking, leaving out the acidizing issue and the steam injection issue, the basic component of this is to include a broth of various chemicals
Right.
into the water that's being, a monstrous amount of water, and therefore a monstrous amount of chemicals are being added, most of which are proprietary and they refuse to disclose.
Right.
But it's known they include things like benzene and toluene and xylithium and all kinds of stuff that they're dangerous chemicals. These are
Right.
dangerous chemicals to the health.
Right.
And they're volatile chemicals, so they can evaporate, leak out, and dissipate pretty quickly.
Yes. And not only that, when you haul that back up out of the well, it's called produced water. You also liberate naturally occurring chemicals and radiation, boron, naturally occurring radioactive materials. They call them norms. And then you have to do something with this water. Now, you can recycle it to a certain extent, but at some point you're going to have to get rid of it completely. And basically the technique there is to inject it back into the ground. And that has all kinds of other implications because number one, you're removing it permanently from the hydrological cycle. It's no longer going to evaporate and form rain and so forth. And there is always a chance that that can migrate, or these chemicals can migrate up out of the water through gravel formations and so on and contaminate aquifers. Plus, the very active hydraulic action injecting into the well and injecting the wastewater also has now, it turns out, causes earthquakes.
Well, we'll get into that in a moment. But let's stay with this chemical issue, because I think this is the scariest part. The other things it's all frightening to me, and I don't think I panic easily. But these chemicals that we're describing are things that create cancers and lungs and heart and kidneys and blood. Hugely
Asthma,
dangerous.
infertility,
asthma, all kinds of dangerous
endocrine
things.
disruptors.
And they're in the ground semi-permanently now, pretty
Right.
much permanently.
Yeah.
So that's the worst. I mean, the minimum worst scenario is these dangerous chemicals are put in the ground. Some of it's brought back out, but 20% or more is left in the ground
Right.
by their own statistics. It permeates into the surrounding ground, or it rises up out, or it gets, in the worst case scenario, into the aquifers.
Right.
And we know that it can get into aquifers and pollute larger bodies of water that were heretofore untouched.
That's right. And now the oil industry will say, oh, these reservoirs of oil are very far below the ground and below the aquifers.
Right.
And to an extent that is true, although steam injection is much closer to the water table. But the danger is always in the leaking of the well casings.
Right.
And when think of the hydraulic pressures involved. Now you can raise a car with a little pump like this. The hydraulic is very powerful, and that's what they use to actually fracture this rock, and the sand keeps the cracks open. But that hydraulic action itself is unpredictable. In fact, the steam injection is another area of unpredictability. That is, they have these things called surface expressions, where you'll have a pool of oil suddenly appear, or boulders being thrown out of the ground because the oil goes in unpredictable directions. They've had real problems with that up in Alberta, spoiling an entire lake and a forest with a lake of oil that they can't do anything about.
Well, we know from experience that the scientific predictions about what's going to happen are often surprised by the result that happened that
Yes.
they didn't expect.
Science is a trial and error
That's right.
process.
Well, I mean, just going to Fukushima, and that was a nuclear facility that was protected and would never be a failure, and now it's a failure, and they say, well, we should have seen it. Well, you should have seen some of these. Now, we do know that there have been problems with the injection of these chemicals. You mentioned a few of them. The casings themselves are quite long.
Yes.
And the materials they use are subject to, I mean, the Gulf oil spill was a problem with
The cement, yes.
Cement casings,
Yeah.
and so there's no reason. And we
Yeah.
know that there have been around the nation leakages, either surface leakages in escapes, or polluting leakages underground, where these chemicals have permeated into waters, have killed cows, the famous picture of a person's tap water catching on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And these are fact. People tend to think that this isn't true, but it's just something Hollywood made up. But these really are happening.
That's right.
Around the nation, from Pennsylvania to Louisiana and other places.
Right. And this is Santa Barbara's chance to say we don't want that kind of future. What we want is vistas of agricultural lands and beaches, and we want to have tourists visiting wineries, and we don't want to have tanker trucks clogging the highways, and we don't want to see rows of oil derricks and so on. That's what this is about, is what is appropriate for Santa Barbara County. Let them continue doing what they've always done here, a modest level. It's a very small part of the economy, actually. It's just over 1.6% of our gross domestic product here in the county. Less than 1% of the workforce is employed directly or indirectly by the oil industry.
The oil industry itself is claiming, using some different ways of calculating this.
If you include gas station attendants, yeah, that's not really fair, is it?
But it's not. I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
I think this is a bit out of context, but let's go back to that. You're not trying, by this initiative, to eliminate the production of these products in the Santa Barbara County. It's only to eliminate or restrict the method of production.
Yeah, we want to stop before it gets started a new technology that hasn't really been introduced here yet. We want to get out in front of this and say we don't want this to look like North Dakota here in Santa Barbara. We have much greater population density. We have greater economy. We have more scenic vistas, tourism, and so forth. The agricultural tourism and winery segment alone employs like 36,000 people. The oil industry is like less than 1,000. So
Let's
this
talk
is our
about
chance.
why. Okay, and I think leads me to the question of why initiative. Why was it necessary to? It seems to me this is completely compatible with the California ethic and environmental concern,
Right.
and certainly with Santa Barbara's. But why was it necessary to do this on a local county level rather than a statewide level?
Well, it's interesting. Initiatives usually come out of impatience, with the people being impatient with the legislature. That's really where it started years ago. And there's a long history of our government at the federal and state level really failing us, exempting, for example, in the 2005 Energy Act, hydraulic fracturing from supervision of the Clean Water Act. It's specifically exempted. So it has now recently we've got SB 4, Senate Bill 4, which is in effect, and it's producing some regulations, some science studies, and so forth. It's not really determining where fracking is going to occur. That's still left up to the localities. And if there's anything that's left up to locality in state government, it is land use issues. And this is strictly a land use initiative that controls what you can do as far as the land, not specifically how to operate underground and what your operations. It's just that this specific operation in terms of this land in this area, you can't do these things. It's a totally legitimate use of the power of the people.
Right. Well, and also, I'm going to go back directly to this. The state incumbent politicians would not support a statewide.
Well, the oil industry it's powerful. It's the world's most powerful industry.
It is,
and that has an effect on politics, as we all know. When the people are frustrated by inaction due to pressure like that, that's when we have an initiative.
But we have a situation where Governor Brown says we have to study it further, and he continues to approve, I guess, case-by-case applications for fracking around the state.
The pressure is building on Jerry. It's, I think he's in that trying to be a compromise position there, but
he's worried about Texas taking those wells back.
He's close to being on the wrong side of history in this case.
So let's move on. Other local governments in California have resorted to the similar local initiative. I think Santa Cruz already banned it.
Santa Cruz did this already, yes.
And
various cities have done it.
And then there's Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills
of all places.
Yeah.
Well, I worked in Beverly Hills one time. There's a well there on the campus of the high school. Produces a lot of money.
That's right. It's a Veneco well.
Yeah, that's right. And they're worried about that being fracked, I suppose.
Kern County is doing an initiative right now. They've got 10,000 signatures.
Butte County?
Butte County, I meant Butte, yeah.
And San Benito County, I think, also, which surprised me.
Yes.
So that's good. It's happening sort of.
Yeah, it's happened in Boulder, Colorado. And New York essentially. New York essentially has a moratorium on it.
Right.
So this is all because the industry kind of got out in front of the whole regulatory process. They made a lot of money doing it, but it's now the case of the people saying, "Now hold on, just a minute. There's repercussions to what you're doing here. We don't necessarily want it here, and we want to make sure more about it." So at the state level, you got SB 4, which is, unfortunately, it doesn't cover steam injection. It does cover acidizing and so on, but it doesn't really provide a strong regulation of it at all. It does provide some science.
Well, let's go back and talk about a couple other things that we skipped over briefly because I was trying to move on to this other subject. But one of the things that, at first I thought this was something out of a James Bond movie, a strange concept, but maybe it was based on science when they made the movie. There is apparently a clear association with the injection of fluid and liquids into the ground and the increase in earthquakes in communities and states that have almost no history of earthquake activity.
Yes. Ohio is having swarms of 4.0 quakes. And imagine, that's Ohio. Imagine what kind of quake you could have in an area as seismically active as us. Not only are we close to the San Andreas Fault, just over the hill, the San Andreas Fault runs very close to a nuclear power plant. The North County
is... Fukushima concerns.
Yeah, the North County is, 26 miles from the...
Well, I mean, in Arkansas, I think they had 800... earthquakes in a few months, and they put a moratorium on further injection.
Right, and at first they thought it was the injection of the wastewater because that goes down deeper and it's larger volumes and so forth. But it turns out no, it's not. It's both. Well, the original injection.
Personally, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't want that wastewater put into my rivers and reservoirs. if it goes back into the ground because it's already contaminated and polluted, they're not going to clean it up, are they?
Yeah, it's pretty impossible once the
I would think
horses left the barn,
Yeah, I mean, if you, I don't know how you on a molecular level you're going to get some of this stuff out of that water.
Right.
I'd be concerned about it, but yeah. So we have a serious issue in stable areas like Arkansas or Ohio or Oklahoma.
Right.
And then in those communities, all of a sudden they start getting the shakes. And, like you say, 4-point earthquakes are not something, especially in areas that are not fit, retrofit to that kind of building code.
Yeah.
So this is a serious issue, and as you mentioned, in Santa Barbara County, even more so.
Yes.
So we've got the danger of these chemicals escaping into groundwater, also being escaping on the surface, and you mentioned a couple examples where that has happened. And I think if you see the movies, Gasland and a couple of movies, where you know that there are places where the fluids were on the surface and animals were dying.
Oh yeah.
Farm animals were dying. And these are true stories again. I think there's a tendency in my part and others to diminish what you see on television. If you see a fictional movie from Hollywood, you say, well, that's just they made it up, but it does happen.
Well, when we were gathering signatures, a couple of people who signed the petition that I was carrying were oil workers, or had been oil workers in the past. And they said, boy, it's really needed. You should see what those guys do on those oil rigs, as far as handling of chemicals and so forth. These are oil workers.
I would have no comfort that the ownership of these corporations cares that much about what they do on a case by case. Look what BP did in the oil spill. Look what the energy companies are doing with the coal ash in the East Coast. Storing that stuff. So
spilling is part of the process.
That's true.
There's just no escaping that it's going to happen. And it has happened already many times in Santa Barbara County. To the extent that you increase production, you're going to increase spilling.
But we're talking about, like as I say, 3 to 5 million gallons of water.
Plus, huge amounts of water.
Plus 20% chemical addition to that water being sloshed around, pushed underground under hydraulic pressure, huge pressures, blowing back on your face, blowing back into the environment, and polluting our world.
And then think about the infrastructure that a large development of this kind of high-intensity operations entails in terms of truck traffic.
Yeah.
And wear and tear on the roads, but mostly wear and tear on people driving with all these trucks. Somebody was trying to calculate how many trucks it would take to handle the oil produced by one of these wells, and it's like one truck every 20 minutes or something. So.
Well, we're going to have, I understand that argument. I think the argument is more legitimate when you say, well, how are you going to get this water to your well size? Because that's a huge amount of trucking. You're not truck all that water, and you referred to that. And that's unnecessary because you wouldn't have had that but for the use of this technology.
Right.
And other things like that. So,
on property values. Property values are shown to decrease in areas that have fracking operations because who wants to live there? Who wants to buy a house next to an operating fracking well? Oh
no, these farms in the east and the Midwest, in Pennsylvania, and those areas that were associated with fracked areas, they couldn't sell them.
Right.
And I think that's true. If you see the animals dying, the vegetables won't ripen, things aren't healthy, then nobody's going to buy that land.
Right now the oil industry in Santa Barbara produces about 2.6% of the property taxes that the county collects. So that leaves like 97.4% of other industries that are producing property tax. Now, to the extent that you increase a high-intensity oil operation, you might increase, the oil is only taxed based on the property tax. There's no tax on the amount of oil coming out of the ground.
We do not have
the reserves are part of what goes into figuring out that property tax. But to the extent that you increase that amount of property tax you collect from this one smaller segment, you can possibly end up with a net decrease because of the decrease in assessed valuation of the adjoining properties.
Okay. So let's talk in the last few minutes that we have about what people can do to help who are interested in this. And now, by the time this gets on the air, the Board of Supervisors will have held their meetings, and I'm certain what's going to happen is going to be on the ballot in November. And so in the general election in November, there will be a huge campaign against this by some of the wealthiest industries.
Bottomless pit of money.
Right. And what we have to respond to that is the ability on a local level to communicate pretty effectively.
Well, we have a very small budget.
We mentioned, I hope we got your email address, website address, but if not, go ahead and give it again.
Waterguardians.org.
Not hard. Waterguardians.org. I'll try to put that on the notice we send out on the program when it comes out. You're looking for volunteers to do what?
We're looking for volunteers to walk the precincts. We think that we won't have money for television advertising and mailing and printing and so forth. Hopefully somebody out there will think to donate some money to us, but we're not expecting to have a very large budget to do this. But other campaigns have been totally successful in the light of huge spending by oil companies against people's initiatives like this.
A few years ago,
Yeah,
the
71%.
local voters in Carpinteria defeated was it Veneco?
Yes.
Attempt to build a larger extraction
Right.
treatment facility there, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they want to harvest the oil out of them.
Right, and so despite the amount of money and the promises that Veneco made to the local community of great wealth and parks and all this bribery, really, it was still defeated by the locals. So there's no reason to believe that this cannot be defeated as well.
Yeah, we can do this. With the amount of signatures we gathered in such a short period of time, it resonates with the electorate. And a very effective technique is walking door to door and saying, hi, I'm a volunteer. Would you support this on the ballot? That's the most powerful thing. We also need spokespeople that represent sectors. And we've gotten some like avocado growers, farmers. We'd like to get people that are in industries that would be threatened, such as winemaking, by large amounts of advanced oil development, tourism. We'd love to get some people making statements on those.
One of the issues that the companies are. I received a survey, quote unquote survey, a public opinion survey that I answered a week or so ago. This was clearly on behalf of the industry, the oil industry, asking essentially loaded probative questions, probing questions, trying to see what would sell for them. And clearly what they're going to do is at least thinking about doing a probing, the idea that this is unfair to the oil industry in the North County because it's a poor community and the people up there need the economy more. And then also they're going to try to imply that the county will be sued for lost profits that the industry can't extract from the wells if they can't use this technology, and a couple other things. But we need to get the facts out on some of these things.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of things about the size of the industry, its percentage of the economy, and let's also talk in the few moments we have left. Well, maybe we don't have time to, but the truth is that this is not a taking. The
initiative is very carefully constructed by a well-established law firm with experience in this area to avoid any takings claims. Okay. Like it said, it specifically exempts any conventional operations, and permitted and planned and sort of all arranged projects are not covered by this.
Well, Jim, thank you for being here. We're going to have to do this again, I hope.
Oh yeah,
in the fall.
Glad to.
And thanks to the crew, Ali Adamek, Juanita Chatham, and Tess Burke, and we look forward to